So I'm going to talk about the Paralympic Games, particularly about the two athletes I coach personally, Michael Roeger and Jaryd Clifford. So I'm going to start just, I presented a town hall, some of you might have been at, just our plans for Paris. So I just sort of go through a couple of slides and sort of see how well we follow those plans. So this is our Paralympic distance team. So we had obviously Michael in the T46 1500, Jaryd in the T12, T13, 5K and 1500. We had the two T38 boys, Reese Langdon and Angus Hinksman, and we had Annabelle Coleman on her first team in the T20 1500. So Gav mentioned that he spent a bit of time with us.
I'm going to jump in, Philo. Is that your second slide? We've just got your title slide on there at the moment.
Oh, okay, it's not going through. Let's go back.
Or I can do that. I can skip to here we go. Pictures of athletes now.
Yeah, but just not in the presenter view. Is that?
No, that only moves on your screen, Ned, not everyone's.
Oh, okay.
I've made that mistake in meetings before.
See if you can switch forward from there, Philo. I'll click to next slide.
Yeah. How's that going now? Is that good?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. Right. Thanks, mate. Sorry, Gary.
Sorry about that. No, thanks for jumping in. That's looking better for me. I can see you guys now. So we did a camp in November. Where sort of a pre-comps phase that all went pretty well. Sort of a few things I'll discuss when I talk about Jaryd. We had another big camp in January where Annabelle and Angus joined us. We keyed in with Gavin and his crew. Vish was up there as well. We've used altitude a lot with all our prep. So we had that planned, and it's an important part of our preparation. We're going to use the domestic season for race practice. Like, we had a couple of clear strategies we were going to use for those boys. So we wanted to practice them. Obviously, we had some setbacks with Jaryd. He didn't get as much racing as he wanted. Michael, we definitely used the races to hone some of our training and preparation. We had the Kobe World Champs, which was a bit of a spanner in the works. Michael and Jaryd both ran there, and I talked through that. We didn't end up going to Queensland, sort of just didn't fit in with training, but we did target a few races in Europe, which were really good. In the midst of the St. Moritz camp. So I'll talk a bit about those. And then we went to Montpellier just for 3 days, just to get in with the team, get ready. And then we were into Paris with Jaryd and Michael after that. So race practice was important for Michael, not so for Jaryd. We were sort of had bigger fish to fry about just trying to get running and get fit. So we'll talk a bit about that. Speed development, really important for both of them, but we only really did it with Michael. Running mechanics, I'll talk a bit more about that, but we definitely targeted. And obviously building aerobic capacity at altitude and with training was a big part of our prep. And we had a ticking across for robustness, which I think led to some of the results we saw. So we'll talk about Michael first, and I've just put running mechanics. That was our one thing we really focused off in the final preparation. So he had a good rebuild post-Worlds, and probably the most consistent he's been in training, injury, illness-free, really good lead-up, which was a big plus because he's had a lot of injuries leading into races, major races in the past. But I don't know really why, but the first few races were really bad. Like, he looked really bad. He was sitting down. He was real high cadence. He was really struggling in the last part of the race. So we did a bit of a project, the AIS, where we tried to really work on trying to get him into a better running position. We watched videos of his good races, trying to get him to run that last 100 really well, like the last lap of the last 100. And we thought getting there efficiently was a key. So we used sort of physiology, biomechanics, physiotherapy, S&C. And he's always been a very aerobic athlete. So we tried to maintain that with improving some of those anaerobic capacities. So we did a lot of hills. We did a lot of race pace work. We had a big S&C focus where we had one session really focusing on strength and one focusing a lot more on power and speed development. And we really honed in the race strategy. what he was going to do to try and win at Paris. So this is just a little bit of a graph of his prep, so you can sort of see a little bit of a false start after Paris Worlds. So I've got the green stars above as the major races, and that's just kilometres per week. So Rogue's got straight back into 100 Ks after a couple of weeks, but then a little bit of a dip, and then the more sort of gradual build and hold with a bit of a taper leading into the races. So you can see Nationals, the first one, Kobe World Champs, the next one, and then the European races and the Paris Worlds. So pretty happy with where we were able to get with Michael, and it'll be quite contrasting when I go through Jaryd's similar graph. So the session we decided on just to try and work on some of the mechanics was this session I've done with the group a bit. So it's 4 400s at 3K pace, 2-minute cycle, 3 400s at 15 pace on a 3-minute cycle, and then 1 400 all out. And we did laser and video to look at some of the biomechanics and speed, and we obviously took lactates at the end of each of those sets. So I hope you can all see that, but this is just some of the, we pretty much hit the speeds for the 2 testing periods. So he was running like 60, 62, 63s, 58s, and then the last one you can see was 55 in the first, 58 in the first one, and then down to 56. Interesting with the lactates, so you can see in the first time he tested, we got lactates here, it's probably in the next slide. No. I've got it there. He's basically at 20 plus lactate. There we go. 24 lactate on the 5th of March going into that all-out rep. And he pretty much went no faster in that all-out one than he did in the last rep of the 1500 pace one. So lots of lactate. Basically, the 1500 pace is not doing efficiently. When we did some of the post-testing, we can see the lactate in that post-testing down, still high, but 18 is a lot lower than 24, and he was able to run a lot faster in that last rep. So some of the stride stuff, he was definitely longer in the stride, less reliant on cadence. So the things we've been working on in the gym and on the track were paying dividends. We were going to do a third test, but it sort of just didn't work in with training, but we were pretty happy we were on the right track, and the races were a lot better too. So Nationals, he ran 350 and looked a lot better. So I'll move on to Jaryd now. So we'll go into both of their performances, but just the contrasting things we had to deal with Jaryd. So he had a bunch of injuries. So he had a femoral stressy at Worlds last year, ran with it, got silver medal, had a pretty big deload after that. We had a lot of momentum going. We had 3 months. He was probably in the best shape of his life, actually. He was going to run an 800 because he was going real quick, and he just started getting sore up in Perisher. So it was actually before, it was after Perisher. So we sort of had a few different runs of this, but this one we took a bit of time off, and then we just reduced the load but tried to keep the running going. And he almost got there for ACT champs and had another stress fracture in his tibia. The same one, probably just hadn't recovered. So he didn't have the qualifier for one. So we did a lot of work on the treadmill on a gradient to try and keep that anaerobic capacity and running feel going. But trying to offload the tibia stress fracture reaction, whatever you want to call it. And he raced a 5K guided quite well and pulled up sore after that. So our next thing was trying to run a 1500 while he was in some sort of shape, or we were going to miss the boat and just be chasing our tail. So he ran Box Hill Burn, ran 348 off pretty much no running over ground, which was pretty impressive. So I made the call just to do Nationals to get the second qualifier, and then we could just go back to square one and build fitness again, which is what we did. We basically just built volume before intensity. He went over to London to try and get some warmer weather training and some racing, and he was pretty much only doing 1500 base sessions just before he came to St. Moritz. So not ideal, but we just adapted the best we thought. So this is a similar graph that I presented to Michael, and you can see the red arrows are the injuries, the green stars are the racing. Very similar build up to Michael after Worlds. We're hitting a point we're happy with, and then you can just see we've had a few hiccups on the way, which makes preparing for a Paralympic campaign difficult. But we got there in the end. So you can see that last block, we got to pretty much a point we were happy with. He actually ran 3:41 in his first race in London, off a lot of thresholdy, tempo-y type stuff, a few sort of hill sessions, and maybe 1 or 2 track sessions. So we were pretty happy where he was. Ran at 8:13 and then a 3:48 before Paris, and he was actually looking real good. So we got there, but only just, and it took a lot of sort of changes, consultation, sort of trying to work out what was the best to get the qualifiers won, but get into good shape for the games. We're happy he was in his best shape with what we had to go with, but maybe not the best shape he could have been in without the injuries. Like Michael, we had a clear race strategy. Guiding was something we had worked on a lot, so he ended up deciding to go with guides in the 5K, and our tactic was to run under 3 minutes for the last 1200, try to turn it into a 1500. We thought the Russian guy was going to be guided. He wasn't. The pace was super slow. The Spaniard was able to run 258, 259 for the last 1200, and he ended up getting DQ'd because they dropped the guide rope, but that wasn't ideal. So physio at Parrish, I mean, St. Moritz was really important. Jen Cook came with us, and it was about the stage at every training camp where he started getting sore again, and that just started playing with his mind. And Jen was just awesome in working with when to sort of modify sessions to keep him in a good mindset and make sure that we weren't drifting into another injury. So that was really good, and being adaptable is key, I think, in these situations. So I won't dwell on Kobe, but what it was good for is for Michael and Jaryd both to have another comp against their competitors, and it really allowed us to hone Michael's strategy. So at Kobe, we decided that he would run 62s for 3 laps, which is solid pace, but pretty comfy for him. Hopefully hurt everyone else, but not him, and he better to sort of hold them off, but they went with him comfortably and kicked past him with 300 to go. So that sort of changed our strategy to try and run 3:45 from the gun, and just all our training and all our race preparation was to be able to do that efficiently. All the testing we did. And Jaryd, we sort of worked with the idea that Russian was probably going to be guided and take it out solid, and Tim would sort of go with it, and then Clarkey would come in and they'd sort of blow them away in the last 1200. So that was how we used Kobe. So both of them did slightly different preps. Jaryd went to London with a group of guys, including Angus, Tim and Dion. They had a few races, they had some really good training, and that pretty much got him back in contention, really. Like, he was nowhere near at a Kobe, but after London, we thought he was ready to go again. Rogues we kept back in Canberra. We really worked on some of that speed, lactic tolerance, and mechanics, and trying to work on that race strategy where he was going to go to the front and drive it. So similar to St. Moritz, to Gavin, we went to St. Moritz for three to 4 weeks. I think we were there for 4 weeks, but we had a couple of races, which were good. Yeah, like I said before, I've had like a bit longer up at altitude, which I think I like. The races just throw the training out a little bit. Like, it changes, so you sort of have to front end the camp a little bit more to try to get the work in, and then deload enough for the race. And I think we rushed the travel a bit just so we didn't lose altitude. So they served their purpose, but it was a little bit of a compromise. But probably the main reason we went to St. Moritz was to get those races, so they would be really ready to go. First time I'd been, awesome training. Like, the trails were really good, tracks there, facilities were amazing. Most of the athletes, including me, probably found not quite as good post Flagstaff, like that 400 meters high. I don't know, anecdotal, but I think sometimes after those Flagstaff camps, the athletes just feel a bit invincible, like coming down, and maybe not quite the same as St. Moritz. So it's something I'll sort of discuss with a few guys, and but we're going to have the Olympics in LA, so I think Flagstaff's going to be back on our agenda anyway. But that was good. So yeah, 3 weeks there, deloaded a bit for the races. Physio, as I said, was critical, and then we had that 3 days in Montpellier, which probably will lead to a slide in the future. Maybe Paris straight away would have been better, just to save some travel. And that's just a quick overlay of the 2 preps, so you can see clear differences. Obviously, we would have liked Jaryd to be up there like Michael. And I think even though he got there ready, maybe that was sort of, definitely inhibited his end performance. All right, so Paris, day 1 in the village, I got COVID. I basically got shuttled out to the mob hotel and basically had to do that last week of coaching via WhatsApp. Rogues came one day and we had a bit of a chat through the window. But I think what I've done with my athletes is make them not relying on me. If I'm not there, they can still prepare and get themselves ready. So I think all the stuff we've done in the lead up kept us in good stead. I still had COVID when they race, but Rich allowed me to go out there with a mask and warm up with them and watching the stands. So that was good. So how did the races go? So Michael ran pretty much awesome. To a T, I think I re-watched the video recently. He was 61, 61, 60 for the first 3 laps. 300 to go, you wouldn't have thought he could lose. But I just think the occasion got to him a bit. He started looking at the screen a bit more. He probably pushed a bit hard from 300 to 200 to go. And the Russian just had enough of a sniff. So the Russian sort of was coming. Rogues was tying up, and to his credit, he held on for silver because those other 2 guys were coming pretty hard. So, we were pretty happy. Definitely was a way to win the race. So that was very positive. Jaryd, I already mentioned before, the 5K was a bit of a disaster. Dropping the guide rope, losing the bronze. I think he was good enough to win the gold. But that's the way it went. And then the 1500, I think a little bit based on the 5K and some of the other races, Jaryd just didn't want to leave it a chance. So Tokyo 3 years before was super slow, 52-second last lap, and he came 3rd, but could have been 5th. So he decided to run similar to Rogues. He ran 3:44 from the gun. Everyone behind him ran national records, and he came 4th again. So he was pretty unlucky. But I think from what he had gone through, he was pretty, and I was too. I was pretty proud of the way he hit the start line and competed at the games. All right, so that's all.
Awesome, Philo. Thanks for so many different aspects there, whether that's altitude training, whether it's altering cadence, whether it's, I found interesting the rehab on the treadmill with the gradient. And then all the way to the point, like I knew some of that detail of having COVID in Paris. Stick your hand up if you've got any questions, but again, what you think about them. I'm interested in terms of how you handle the emotions between athletes when, obviously really happy with the result with Rogues and a couple of challenging outcomes for Jaryd. How do you go about turning things around, say after? Sorry, I can't quite remember the sequencing of races there. I think the 5K was first, wasn't it, for Jaryd? To be able to bounce back from that and then go back to Rogues the next day and say, all right, now you're ready to race. So
the same day. They were 20 minutes apart, so it's
there you go.
You
well, you didn't get to see in between.
It, or I can't work out how to turn it off. Anyway,
I'll play around with buttons and you can answer that one.
So it's been tricky because Jaryd and Rogues have been the 2 athletes who have probably been in position to win gold medals in the last 2 or 3 Paralympics, and usually they're scheduled on the same day. So this time I had COVID as well, so I didn't want to be around the team or the athletes as much. So I sort of sat up the stands and just went through it. And Jaryd was obviously first, and yeah, it all unfolds so quickly, all the years of work, and it's sort of there, it's there, it's there, and then it's not. And the similar thing happened in Tokyo, and it's tough because I thought both of them were going to win the race until they didn't. And as soon as he finished, I thought, yeah, bronze is okay. Definitely have to debrief and see what happened with the crew in that last lap. But at least got a medal. But I didn't even know he got DQ'd, and then pretty much just had to focus on Roeger's race, which was a similar. Like, that was hugely. I thought I was in tears because I thought he's finally done it. 300 to go. I thought there's no way he can lose this race, and then 200 to go. It's like it's happening again. So it's a big wave to ride. It's sort of like we've been going since 2013, chasing the gold medal, and but the good thing that probably made it better for me was he was just so elated with the silver medal, whereas normally he's just been devastated with losing. So it was almost like everything we'd done for those race tactics and that strategy, no stone unturned. It was almost like his gold medal. And his fiance was there, his brother was there, their kids, and it was, yeah, pretty special celebrating with him. But probably 10 minutes later, I had to deal with Jaryd and his parents and Clarkey and Tim, and pretty gut-wrenching stuff because I think that was a gold medal that went begging. And obviously, we talked a lot about what went into Jaryd's prep with injuries, but there's a lot that goes into it with the guides as well. So, yeah, it was a tough day, and I was feeling like shit as well because I was sort of in the middle of COVID. Yeah, but yeah, you look on those memories fondly regardless, I think, because there's so much you put in to the athlete. Yeah, so it was good. It was so different than Tokyo. Having everyone there was so much better. Like, I remember after Jaryd's 1500, he had 50 people went to lunch, and obviously they would have been like to celebrating a medal, but they were there for him to pick him up. And still, so he ran 3:44. Like, it's like he raced well. He just didn't come away with what he wanted, but that was pretty important, I think.
Yeah. JR's
Hey,
unmuted
that,
himself. Yeah,
that was a good question. I think, and Gav mentioned before that he found the camp tough because he couldn't fill in the time. But I think it's important for us as coaches to build, I'm probably going a bit off topic here, but build relationships with the coaches on these phones and the other coaches at the games, because, you know, it's pretty tough going to these Olympics. You know, nothing always goes to plan. The unexpected can happen, and it can be lonely there because you haven't got your family there, you haven't got your friends there, and all you've got is these other coaches that you can lean on. So I think it's really important that you build relationships with other coaches, because I've been lucky enough to have build some friendships here, and I can talk to any one of the coaches here. But I've also seen some of the other coaches on this call struggle and been happy that I've been there to support them. So I just want to give that advice. Take it if you want, but I really think it's important to build relationships with the coaches on this phone call.
I think you epitomised that. Thanks, JR. Gav, did you have your hand up for a question before we move on? You're still on mute.
We're good. That's okay. So, Philo, you kind of mentioned St. Moritz was a great training venue, but you'd prefer that little bit of extra altitude. Did you remodel your training for the lower altitude? Like, was everything a little bit more intense or a bit less aerobic? How do you approach that? Like, what's 400 meters between friends?
Yeah, it definitely can go a bit harder. Flagstaff is a bit of a leveler, 2200. Like, first few sessions, like, it's you've got to be quite astute with your sort of recoveries and your pace and like your distances. St. Moritz was there. Like, it wasn't far off, but it was enough to notice. So definitely the sessions were a bit easier. You were definitely able to push a bit harder. So I think recovery became important. And I think JR's comment about Jess recovering, like, that was like a number one priority of hers. I think that's really important. And a big thing for me is not overcooking it at altitude. So I probably just fine tuning it a little bit with the slightly lower altitude. I've been to Perish a heap, so it's not hugely different, but different enough that I think you've got to adjust the training a bit for that slightly high quality. And I think the other thing I missed, and Rogue's got an extra week. He went over a week early to Flagstaff to try to get 3 weeks before the first race, whereas Jaryd probably only had 2. That's probably something I would change if I did it again. I think just a longer period. That's why I asked you the question, how you found it, because I think 2 weeks is probably not enough just to maximize some of the altitude benefits before those races, because the races throw it out. Like you're traveling, you mightn't be delighting much, but you're delighting enough for those races just to interrupt those adaptations you get at altitude. So if I went St. Moritz again, I'd probably go a bit earlier. And you're tied to those races, not heaps of races on, especially for us, ones that we can get in. So we had a few that we could go to, and we travelled the day of on the first race. We travelled down on the train, raced the 3K, Rogues ran 8:03. We travelled back the next morning. And then Germany, we travelled 10 plus hours a day before race, came back the next day. So it's a fair bit of travel fatigue, and you've got to factor that into recovery and training. Probably waffled on a bit, but definitely things that sort of I was working on the fly, being in St. Moritz rather than Flagstaff.